Live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show. Oh, thank you. I'm clapping for you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Clap for if you believe. How would we know you believe if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. Thank you so much for joining me on this special Wholesome Sabbath episode, this Shabbat episode, on this Friday, February the 8th. It is February the 8th. Thank you for joining me. And also, this is a very special episode. I'm finally back from my 1-week stint in Facebook jail. It's a hard life out there, but I made it, and I'm back, and I'm very happy and grateful to have you here with me, Spike Cohen. This is a Muddied Waters Media production. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, on YouTube. We're on Instagram. We are on SoundCloud. We're on Twitter. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We're on Google Play. We are on pretty much anywhere that you can find podcasts or people who share stupid memes. We are on there. Muddied Waters Media, the Muddied Waters of Freedom, My Fellow Americans. Come check us out. As always, I would like to thank Kroger for this delicious, purified drinking water that I drink on this and every episode of My Fellow Americans. Bulavanaka. Thank you so much. The intro and outro music to this and every episode of My Fellow Americans is from the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi. That is Jodavi. Check him out on Facebook, on SoundCloud. Go to his Bandcamp. There's a website called Bandcamp. I think it's like jodavi.bandcamp.com, something like that. Go check him out on his Bandcamp. Buy all of his music. It's not expensive. You'll spend like $10. It's really good music. Be sure to do that. Mr. Joe Davi, thank you again. Shout out to Tehran Turks, his mom and him as always. Guys, my guest tonight is a real up-and-comer in the world of political activism and punditry. I, as the consummate opportunist, am getting in on the ground floor before she really takes off. I'm really excited to have her on with me. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of the Liberty Cadre. I think I'm saying that right. Cadre? 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 Of Liberty Cadre, a conservative Christian group. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the lovely and talented Miss Nzinga Johnson. Nzinga, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you, Spike. I appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words.
Oh, you're welcome. What's that?
Especially the lovely part.
Yes, lovely, talented, beautiful. So thank you so much. Ever since I first started following you last year, I realized that I needed to have you on. Mostly because you have such a presence in your appearances on different shows, and because I do think you're a real rising star. Also because you tolerate my anarchist propaganda, and I really appreciate you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Guys, be sure, if you're with us, be sure to comment with any questions or thoughts that you have, and Nzinga and I will tell you if you are right or wrong. Now, Nzinga, whenever I have a guest on here for the first time, the first thing I ask is, how would you describe your political beliefs, and then how would you say you got there? Was it kind of an aha moment or sort of a gradual evolution from something else? Talk to us about that.
I guess I've always been conservative, just didn't know it. I did have my views on like race, so I believe in white privilege, things like that. The white man is keeping us down kind of thing. I never voiced it because I was never in an environment where I had to. Like, I didn't go to a 4-year school. I grew up in church. I was raised in a Christian school, so we never talked about things like that.
Right.
But there was a friend of mine. Her name is Becca. She actually writes for Liberty Cadre. Post things Facebook that would make me so angry, especially the stuff about race. And then one day I was looking at something Ben Shapiro said, and it ticked me off. And I thought to myself, why am I angry? And so usually if I'm angry about something, it's because whatever is making me angry is the truth. So I started to kind of dive in, look at studies, read up on conservatism, ask questions. A few people in my church are big conservatives. So I just asked questions and got curious, and then kind of started to form my own philosophy. And now I'm kind of writing and putting my points of views out there.
Pretty cool. So, if you don't, I was curious, what exactly was it that Ben Shapiro had shared? Was it was a racially related thing?
Oh yeah, it was one of his speeches at a college, I think, and it was something about it was about white privilege,
Okay.
and he said there, like, pretty much there's no such thing. Um, at the NBA, I can't remember. He uses this NBA analogy and why he's not in the NBA and how that's not necessarily like discriminatory, but
Oh,
it was
okay.
something
I think
along
I
those.
know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard it in a while, so I can't remember it fully because that was a few. That was what 4 years ago, maybe. So it was Ben Shapiro said.
Right, right. So then you got into Liberty Cadre. I keep feeling like I'm saying that wrong. I'm
No,
not
you're saying it
100%.
perfectly.
Is it Cadre? I feel like it's like a
Yeah,
French word, and I'm supposed to be saying it
I've
differently.
heard
Um,
Cadre too, but I think that sounds
That's
worse.
what that's what it is. Is it's Cadre instead of Cadre. Okay. So you founded Liberty Cadre. How long ago was that?
Last February, so it's been about a
Oh,
year.
okay. And so what are your goals in the activism and things that you want to see with Liberty Cadre?
Um, I want to hire. I like the idea of CRTV, now Blaze TV, and I like giving really smart friends that put their ideas out, and they talk to me, and I say, why don't we create a platform for these people to put their ideas out there, outlet, if you will.
Right.
And so um, that's kind of what I want to do. I want to create like content where people can come and we can laugh at liberalism, and we can be philosophically sound, have a Christian slant, so they can get that as well. So I want is really what I want. Activism. I want to make it so that conservatives are serving the community. We get people to vote Republican all the time, and I think that's probably a flaw in the Republican. We want people's votes, but we don't necessarily want to serve them when it's not voting season.
Now, do you think that's something that's unique to Republicans, or do you think that's just sort of partisans in general, where it's like vote for us, and then when it's over, it's like, all right, we'll see you in 2 years.
Yeah, I have never been involved in anything Democrat, so I can't say whether or not that it's like that. But I do know that's a Republican thing,
Okay,
especially when
fair
it
enough.
comes to minorities. They feel like, oh, we don't know what to say, we don't know what to do. If we could just get this one black token, they can speak for us. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think people just want to know that you care, and if you can get them one on one or talk to them where they are, then you'll get them to vote. But I don't think that competes with Republicans.
No, and I've noticed that because I mean I wasn't always an anarchist. I actually was a conservative Republican, and so I remember people having those conversations about why can't we get black votes, and I'm like, you're completely unrelatable to most black people, and finding a 50 to 70-year-old black man or woman or whatever, finding a black baby boomer to basically tell them the same thing you're telling them is not going to, that's not the magic, and it's not an age thing, but like literally if you find a black guy, for example, who just goes to them and says, well, pull your pants up and start talking better, and work really hard or whatever, that's not necessarily going to hit them just because it's a black person. Like that's not the issue.
Yeah,
And it's not to say it's all the fault of messaging, but if you go in with the same message but with a black and not a black face, but a black face in front of a
yeah,
black person saying it, that's not going to instantly be the instant success.
it does not work. They've tried and it doesn't work.
They
They
keep
think it will.
trying.
They still think it will, and I'm like, that's not how this works.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So with and you actually had brought this up where you were talking about the Blexit movement, and the this movement of black people, and I guess there's Latino version of Exit and the gay version of Exit, and there's like a bunch of different ones where they're kind of playing off the idea of Brexit, where they're saying yes, we're for Blexit, it's yes, we're black, but just because we're black, we're not Democrat. And you had talked about, you had actually written a piece about Blexit and identity politics, and that was something I found very interesting, was the idea that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but part of what you were saying was it's all fine and good that now you're voting Republican, but if you're bringing essentially the same mindset and concepts and just now you're voting Republican, that doesn't really change anything. Am I right, or did I miss something there?
Kind of. I just think that identity politics sucks. And then you have on the left, they start to eat each other alive. So, for example, remember the pink hats those women were wearing during the march?
Hmm.
Well, the next time the march came around, at this time the transgender movement had boomed, and then it was like, oh, we can't wear the pink hats because all women don't have vaginas, and then all women don't have pink ones. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So women were taking off the hats in shame because they wanted to appease the other groups. And
Right.
so I'm a little bit nervous about bringing identity politics to the right because I'm like, this is what happens down the line in the next generation, or maybe even in this generation. Are the black conservatives going to be mad at the white conservatives? Are going to be mad at the Latino conservatives? And then going to be mad at the gay conservatives?
Right.
Like,
Right.
if we're not supposed, conservatism, when I came into the movement, is not supposed to be uh, the side where we separate each other up by what we look like. It's supposed to be, oh, we have the same ideology, or we believe the same things, we have the same principles. Let's work together. So that's why I think it's so dumb. And a lot of people argue with me about it on Facebook. A lot of conservatives, but I always ask the question that they can't answer. I'm saying, well, what is the fruit of this? Like, if you plant a seed, you plant an apple seed, you're not going to get oranges. You're going to get an apple seed. So, or you're going to
Right.
get an apple. So, if we plant the same seed as the left, do we think we're going to get different fruit because we're conservative and we're different? And no one's able to answer that question. And so I'm not convinced that identity politics is good for us.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Part of the reason that, and again, this is me with my subtle, not so subtle anarchist propaganda. One of the things with any kind of democratic system, and I know this is a republic and not a democracy, but any system where you choose leaders and policies based on popular vote or who gets the most votes, you have to create voting blocks, right? So, like, in order for me, you could have the best idea on earth, but if you can't get at least if you can't get more people to vote for you than for anyone else, or if you can't get at least 50% plus one, or in a presidential election get the majority of the state's voters, win the majority of the states and all of that. However it works, if you don't get enough people to vote for you, you lose. The easiest
Right.
way to appeal to getting voting blocks is appealing to someone's most base concepts. So even if someone doesn't know anything about politics, if I say to them, hey, look, I'm also a Jew, or hey, look, I'm also white, or hey, look, I'm also from the South, or hey, look, I'm into the same things you are, it especially for someone that isn't as politically knowledgeable, it's easier for me to appeal to them than someone who may have an idea that they like better than what I'm saying, but they're completely different. They're not relatable to that person, and so and there is within part of the Republican Party, or at least I guess the far right or alt right part of the Republican Party, there is identity politics. It's the original American identity politics, which is we're white and we want to keep it that. We want to keep this space white, but I don't think that's the majority of the Republican Party. The Democratic Party is built on this kind of intersectional idea of we are a group of groups, and this group gets this level of treatment, and this group gets this level of treatment. What's difficult, and I'm interested to see if you agree with me on this, with conservatism, is that real, like, constitutional conservatism or paleo conservatism, if you want to call it that, is based on we don't really care what color you are. This is our idea, and it may not be the sexiest idea out there, but it's our idea of how a government should be run, and it really doesn't matter what you look like. So that doesn't you have a challenge that it doesn't appeal as much as saying, excuse me, I'm black, you're black too, or I'm white, you're white too, or we're both Hispanic, you should vote for me.
Mm, I think so, but I also think that liberty is attractive to everyone.
Right.
And if you can, as a candidate, or as a person working for a candidate, if you could somehow shape that message of liberty to people who aren't as politically knowledgeable, you can put it in as simple terms as possible. I think it's attractive to everyone. And so I don't think that Republicans and right-leaning candidates harp on that enough. I think I think a lot of Republicans are too busy trying to convince folks that they're not racist instead of just saying, "Hey, this is what I want. I want liberty for everybody," you know. And they have to shape the message somehow, or else they're going to continue to be on the defense. We got to get on the offense, or
Right.
else we continue to lose that battle. Because that is attractive, I guess. Like I voted for Obama the first time. He had major swag. He played basketball with the Tar Heels.
Right.
I thought he was so cool, and I didn't know anything about politics. So yeah, I voted for him.
Right.
Time I started to learn a little bit more in between the first time he ran and the second time, but I mean, he was cool, so I voted for him. And so it kind of works, but I think liberty works as well. So we got to get some cool liberty-minded candidates, or else we'll continue to lose.
Yeah. It's interesting with Obama. There were people who voted for him because he was cool. There were people that voted for him. Well, there were people that voted for him because they agreed with his politics or because they were Democrats and he was a Democrat. But there were also people that the reason he won, I think, in such a landslide in 08 is because he was young, he was cool, and he was black. And that appealed to a lot of black voters who were like, this is our chance to have a black president. It also appealed to a lot of non-black people who liked the idea that, you know, it would show that we'd moved past, you know, a lot of bad historical things, that we have a black or even half black president, someone who identifies as black and who is appealing to the black community, to have that as a president. I knew a lot of people that voted for McCain, but were still happy that Obama won, or they were okay with Obama winning because they were like, well, at least this helps us turn a page, or it shows how far we've come, or something like that. So I get the appeal of that. I think it was very disheartening to a lot of people who thought this would be not just a face change, but an actual change in how things are done. And he pretty much came in and continued the endless war, endless debt spending, endless taxation policies that every other milquetoast Republican and Democrat candidate before him. So now you're young now, so I would imagine 11 years ago you were young. So you just didn't, at that time, you just didn't really follow politics, or?
No, I thought I was going to the WNBA or playing overseas. That's all I cared about.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about politics at all.
That's funny. So what would you say are the most important things to, and this can be applied, because I mean, the people that watch this show span everything from anarchists to Libertarian Party members to liberty leaning Republicans, which I think probably is where you would fit, to hardcore conservatives. We've even got a few progressives, and like my friends and family members who are trying to figure out what my problem is. So it spans a large group of people. What would you say to people who are trying to spread their message outside of their core group? So this would apply to libertarianism too a lot, because that's a very white heavy group of people. It's very white male centric, not because it appeals only to white males. It is what it is. What would you say to them to be able to outreach to other people without it becoming this pedantic, hey, fellow black person, I'm also into this thing or whatever, and to also make it where they don't come in and bring this, like you were saying, bring in this identity. They came in because, well, I'm black and it seems like black people should be libertarian or black people should be conservative. How would you say to bring them in without avoiding that, or with avoiding that?
I think the one-on-one thing is important. If I hate to say it like this, if you could single out one promising candidate and then kind of get that one person in, like let's say it's you and I, and you were trying to bring me into the anarchist fold.
As I do, yes.
Yeah, you would talk to me. We'd have lunch. We'd have coffee.
Right.
You would send me articles. You'd probably try to play basketball with me. Like, let's hang out. Like, when I think about how the gospel was spread, like it would be less like over meals and things like that. And yes, someone preached. So I think maybe some kind of social media presence is important. But like, show yourself as a human. Don't go in looking for anything necessarily.
Right.
Like, and then get into their world, I think, and then kind of bring it up here and there. I mean, that's the only way I can think of it. I don't think that trying to recruit people is
Right.
going to work. It's got to be some kind of relational aspect going on, or else they'll know. Everyone can call out, crap, and they can tell you want something from me. If you don't
Oh,
want
they could
something from
spot
me,
fake. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you just want relationship. They're like, okay, cool. So I think that's probably it's not as sexy and it's not as quick, but that's probably the best way, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've had a few messaging experts and a few recruitment experts and people that actually some people that for different parties, both the Republican Liberty Caucus and the Libertarian Party, who their job is to help recruit people, and they pretty much said exactly what you just said, which is you have to form relationships with people because people have an innate, especially people that aren't as politically involved, they aren't as worried about this systemized ideology that you're bringing to them. They're more concerned about a sort of an innate sense, not even an emotional sense, but a real like instinctual innate sense of, is this person just coming because they want something from me, or do they actually like want to know what I want and want to help me with that and want to work together with me? And it sounds like you're kind of saying the same thing there. I wanted to talk
Well,
to
it's kind
you
of like
about.
church.
Go ahead.
And it's kind of like church. Like you want to spread the gospel, and
Right.
you want to, get people to love Jesus. You don't keep inviting them to church, especially if they didn't grow up in it.
Right.
And you're gonna freak them out, or they're gonna be like, this person just wants members for the tithing for the pastor. Like that's how people really think. And so what do? You go to their house, you play with their kids, you bring meals by. When they're sick, you call them. Do you need soup? Like you do that kind of thing and serve them, and then they'll come around to trusting you. So it's the same concept.
Right, right, yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because one thing I've noticed, I grew up in the deep South. I'm in Myrtle Beach area of South Carolina, so it's very church heavy here. There's a lot of Christians here, and one thing I've noticed is so it's Sunday, church is out, and you have large groups of mostly people. I mean, there's everything from little kids all the way up to very old people, but I would say the core groups, especially that go out to like Ryan's or Sizzler or whatever afterwards, they're people in their say late 40s to late 60s, and they're kind of, I guess, baby boomers, and they go out and they're going to these different restaurants. And I've also worked in the service industry, and the people that have to work Sunday shifts in the service industry say, watch out, here come the Christians to not tip us. And these are people that are working on a Sunday. They don't go to church. And their experience with Christians, people that identify as Christians, is that they are not giving, they're not tipping, or they're not tipping very well. They're difficult. They're the most difficult table they have. And then if they give them anything, they'll give them those little prayer cards. So, you think you got money, and instead it says, I'm praying for you. And it has a verse about from the New Testament, and then it has the information to the church, or to sign up to listen to the pastor's sermon or whatever. And it's like, great job in associating your church with difficulty and stinginess, not just your faith, but your specific church. You just said, I'm not going to give you any money for the service you just did. So you just made $2 for this hour, or $2.30 or whatever, or $3, whatever it is now. You just made, nothing. You just had a net loss of money working with me. And now here's the name and address of the church that is responsible for this behavior that just happened. And I've heard other Christians say, like, if we're going to be Christian, we can't just be Christian at church and pretend to love each other and then like fight each other to get out of the parking lot and, flip each other off or whatever, driving down the road to get to, Shoney's or whatever, and then show out there and not leave a tip. Like, this isn't evangelism. This isn't very good evangelism.
Right.
And it sounds like you're applying those same things to the political spectrum. You can't be a great conservative or great libertarian or great Democrat, great whatever, to each other at your meetings, and then go out to the world and be a jerk to everyone, and then hand them your candidates, or just smile in their face long enough to hand them your candidates, or your some referendum you're trying to pass or whatever, and hand them that and go, now vote for this. That's not going to work, right?
I agree 100%. And don't invite them to a political meeting too. Like, you should come on out.
Yeah.
Meeting we're having. Like, first of all, it's boring to everyone who's not politically active, and some folks who are politically active, but don't automatically want something from them. And you know what? I've worked in the service industry too, and that is completely true about Christians on Sunday. It's sad, but it's true. I'm in Raleigh,
It's sad.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the Bible Belt, and people come in and they don't tip, and they make it terrible for the server, because like I have a friend who was a server, and she was working on Sunday, and a bunch of people came in, they sat down, they look at her in the face and they say, "We're about to work you." So she thinks she's getting a nice tip at the end. She got barely nothing. Like, come on, guys. And we know you just came from church.
Oh, man. That's and that's terrible. Like, I mean, so Judaism is a religion of like, we don't believe what you believe. Okay, that's fine. Like that, there's no, it's just the opposite. Not only is there no compulsion to evangelize, it's just the opposite. If someone comes in and it's like, why do you want to come in? Why do you want this? This is not, you don't want this. Like, here's all the stuff you have to do. You sure you still want this? Whereas with Christianity, it's very much like, we have this message. We want to save you from eternal damnation. We love you so much that we want to save you from that. Which, by the way, if you lead with that, that's another great thing not to lead with, because that's to go. I see people's zeal and passion. They're like, I'm trying to save you from hell. It's like, okay, a couple notches. Like, you can't come at them like that. But you're saying, the message is, I want to save you from hell. Christ has died and presented with you this way to, repent of your sins and be baptized and filled with the Holy Spirit and the whole thing. And I really want that for you. Now watch as I show you how big of a jerk I am, and like how, or even if I'm not a remarkably jerkish, I'm no different than anyone else out there, but I'm, who you also don't really trust. But then I'm gonna tell you how great I am and how you could have this too. And it's like, well, I don't know that I would want that. So, but you said this, same thing with politics. Hey, I'm like every other person out there, but also I'm really annoying about how much I want you to vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris or whatever. And I'm going to really give you a hard time about it. And especially the Dems now, I'm convinced Donald Trump's going to win re-election just because they are equating people who are even curious about what Trump has to say, or even sympathetic with people who support him, as being like Klan members. And then they say, now vote for my candidate. And it's like, no, I don't think I want anything to do with your candidate. So right. I want to, this is a good chance for us before I have some more questions to ask you, but let me go through the comments here and see if there's anything here. A lot of people saying hi to you. Tom Arnold said, thank you. Let's look at the character of the individual again. Tom Arnold, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know him, he is a perfect example. He's in the Libertarian Party of Tennessee. And he is a perfect example of what we're talking about, of being, if you meet Tom Arnold, you're more likely to vote Libertarian just because of Tom Arnold, even if he doesn't tell you anything about it. Harvey West says, I have been involved in the Republican Party for a long time. I've never seen that aspect of the so-called alt-right. So Harvey, that's an interesting thing. The alt-right is sort of outside of Republican Party circles. They are people who have decided that the Republican Party is their best, most likely way of achieving the goals they want. So they'll vote for Donald Trump. They'll vote for this candidate or that candidate. It's going to be hard to spot them at a Republican Party meeting. In fact, before I go to the next comment, so you've been involved with the Republican Party for a little bit now. Have you seen, and not necessarily in droves or anything else, have you seen within your circles or within the Republican Party circles, people that you would identify with alt-right or identitarian type people, or do you kind of agree with me that they're sort of outside of it and they're sort of outsiders that have kind of co-opted parts of the party?
If they are alt-right, they have not told me.
Okay.
I have not run into one.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's been my experience, is that they're like a separate entity. They're not worried about like joining the party, or they may be party members or whatever, but they're not interested in being active in party politics. They'll just, if they see someone that identifies with what they agree with, they'll vote for them. Perfect example. Tulsi Gabbard, who is a Democrat, is running for president, and David Duke endorsed her. I can assure you, Tulsi Gabbard wants nothing to do with David Duke, and there aren't any alt-right people in her campaign. But there are going to be people that vote for her entirely because of her policies regarding war and Israel. She's not even white. Let me see. Some more people that said hi to you and said how awesome you are.
Thank you.
And what's that?
I said thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I guess you're welcome from them. Why are Christians so cheap in the South? Jacob LaBelle asked. That's what we're talking about. It is a big problem. I think it's more of an age thing than a religion thing. I think a lot of times if you get people in their 60s and stuff like that, they're just gonna like, that's just that mentality of like of being that way. And I think there's kind of a Scots-Irish tradition that's in the South as well about being cheap in general. That's my theory. Do you have a theory about that? Because I mean, like I said, go ahead.
Yeah, I think they compartmentalize. But I think you hit on it, where they're Christians at the church and then they go to the restaurant and they're no longer a Christian. Oh, they're no longer a Christian. That's a stretch. But
right.
It's like when I'm in this setting, they have this mindset, so they think that way and they act that way. And then when they're in this setting, their mindset is different, so they don't think that way.
Right.
That's the only thing I can come up with. I don't know. I really don't. I'm not rich, but I try to tip as well as I can because I've lived off of tips before, and I still do. So I try to tip well. I find that, I find the same thing. Christian, and the only way you can tell is on Sunday, right? If they're Christian or not, and they just don't tip well. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's also part of it, is that a lot of other groups don't necessarily come in hard in like large groups of like, we're this or whatever. So you may not know that, you know, the Jew or the Muslim or the just agnostic general atheist, whatever, is just as bad, but they're not coming in like, I'm an atheist. And, you know, so you're not making that identification, which is why it's even more important. If you're coming in hard and heavy, like I'm a Christian, then give someone a reason to think you're different than everyone else that's in there. And whatever your faith is or your ideology or whatever, if you're trying to make a good show for team whatever you are, then like act like something someone would want to be around. No, tips are never where I'm trying to save my $2. Like if I need to save $6, I'll save it. There's probably somewhere else I can save $6 than to this person that I just ran around in circles with my, you know, telling them all the things I need and all of that stuff. I wanted to talk with you about a little bit of a historical thing. So something that we were talking about appealing to minority voters or people that don't traditionally vote Republican. Something that a lot of Republicans will say, and they'll think when they say it, everyone just melts away and goes, oh my gosh, I can't believe I haven't been voting Republican. They'll say, hey, did you know that the Republican Party was the party that ended slavery? Or they'll say, hey, did you know that all of the first black representatives and politicians that got elected were all as Republicans? And then they'll bring up that the governors that were part of the governors that got involved in the secession movement to start the Confederacy were all Democrats. The governors that did once the Civil War ended and the slaves were freed, it was the Democrat governors that were pushing all of the Jim Crow laws and all of that stuff, all the way up until the end, when it was actually the Dixiecrats that were, part of the Democratic Party that were fighting to stop the integration of the South and things like that. And you'll say that to someone, and they'll say, I don't care about that. Or they'll say, I didn't know that, but that's not relevant to me. How relevant do you think that, just specifically that history, is when you're trying to talk to people about, for example, you're trying to get people to vote Republican? Is that even something that you mention, or is that something that comes up later? Or how much does that factor into your activism and messaging?
It depends on who I'm talking to.
Okay.
If someone brings up something in history, like if I'm talking to a pro-black person and they bring up something, whatever it is, and then I'll say something like, I'll talk about abortion. Like if you're pro-black, certainly you know that it's mainly black babies. Like more black babies are aborted than born.
Right.
You did it. Oh, okay. Like, oh, did you know that it came from a woman named Margaret Sanger? Like, I'll go like that. and
Mm-hmm.
go down the history. I'm sure your viewers are probably already know the history. It depends on who I'm talking to, but also I don't see a lot of people who will talk about the history of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. I don't see them parallel it to today. So, for instance, I was reading on Ida B. Wells and how she was she was a journalist and she was constantly writing about how these black men were getting lynched. And a lot of the reason why they were getting lynched is because some white lady would say, "Oh, he sexually assaulted me, or he raped me, or he whistled out at me, or whatever," and
Right,
that would be
right.
a good for all of the white men to gather and lynch him. And now we have them kind of doing the same thing where they're like, "Oh, sexual assault. He looked at me. He said something to me," and I'm like, "You guys don't see how people are getting like crucified socially, and they're kind of doing the same thing that they did to the black men before." So I try to kind of parallel it that way. I don't think it has a lot of bearing on people who don't know or people who don't even think about the history at all. So,
Right, right.
like I said, I think it depends on who you're talking to.
Right. So one of my more recent bans was as a result of my saying that the history of feminism is largely a history of white women accusing people of doing things to them without any proof, and that got me some new friends, and I had to use the other account that I don't ever name publicly. But that got me having to use that one for a little bit. But yeah, no, I mean there's definitely some historical parallels there where it's like, okay, I said this thing, and you sort of have to believe me because of my status or my yeah, I guess status, you know, where I should rank in society. The fact that I've said this should not require any kind of proof or anything else, and this person's life should be destroyed. So it's interesting you mentioned the abortion thing too. I still consider myself pro-life. As an anarchist, my concept of how that should be handled is obviously a lot different than someone who believes that there should be a governmental structure in life. But I still do consider myself pro-life because I think that my ideology is based on property rights and self-ownership. And if you are a baby, I'm not even going to get into talking about like a zygote or, you know, you know, something that was just fertilized or something. If we're talking, you know, something that we can really identify as a baby, you know, like you know, a week before or a day before being birthed, this is a child that if an emergency C-section had to be performed, you have a completely viable baby here. In that kind of a situation, if we believe that there's self-ownership, if we believe that in anything related to human rights or anything else, I don't see the reason to say that this, whatever you want to call it, fetus, baby, person, whatever, wouldn't have those rights. And there's obviously, we have to be sensitive to the fact that there's a mother that this thing is attached to as well, or this person is attached to as well. But this person's in my mind, at least at that point, the mother's convenience, quality of life, things like that, would have to fall back to the actual existence of this other person. But it's interesting that historically, at least in the U.S., that original push for abortion was originally pushed by people who said, well, not abortion for white people, or not abortion for high-born white people, but abortion for blacks, Jews, Slavs, you know, people of Eastern European descent. Back when there was a much more strict definition of what white meant than now. But you know, Irish people, like, you know, the lesser people, us, you know, Aryan and Anglo-Saxon white people, not for us, but for them, and that was kind of pushed as a policy of making sure that America remained white, and that these lesser people, these people that, you know, according to eugenics were, you know, genetically inferior, to keep their populations under control.
Mm-hmm.
So then,
so you cut out a little bit there. So what was your question?
Actually, it was less of a question. Well, no, I guess it was kind of a question. So I guess my question would be, how receptive, so when you talk to people about that, how receptive would you say that compared to other messages? Do you get reception, or do people kind of say, you know, I don't care about that?
They never say they don't care, because basically if you're talking to pro-black people and then you point out how not pro-black they are if they're pro-choice, or if they vote for Democrats, or even Christians who justify, the reason why they vote left, or they're liberal. They never come right out and say, "Oh, I don't care." It's always more of like, "Well, no answer," pretty much.
Like an equivocation,
or,
right.
It's like, "Oh, they back away." So if I'm on the internet, they won't respond.
They just don't respond, right.
Yeah, in person, it's more of like a slow backing away, like, "Well, and I'm like, no, because you can't justify that, because now you have two philosophies that are conflicting, and I think that happens, it kind of rattles you. It rattles all of us. Like, you have these thoughts that are like, they don't agree. You're like, oh, I have to reevaluate. The problem is that most people don't go back and reevaluate.
No, they don't. Right. So that's actually the thing. I don't know if you know this or not. And for those of my audience that know this, you probably do know this. So that thing you just described, when two beliefs that someone has, especially when they hold them very closely, when they are made to experience the fact that those things completely contradict one another, and that therefore they have to drop one or drop the other or completely come up with something else, they experience a distress, and that distress is called cognitive dissonance. And so all of the and it's a big word for when someone, especially people who don't think about this a lot. So if someone, for example, says, "I'm pro-choice because I think the mother, I don't have a vagina, so I shouldn't be able to decide that for them," or whatever. But then they also say, "No, I know." But they'll say that. I very early on as a kid would say, as a teenager or whatever, be like, "Well, I don't, I'm not a woman. What do I know?" But so they'll say that, but then they'll also say, "I'm pro-black," or I'm a black nationalist or something like that. And when you force them to, or not force them, but when you have them experience, they realize that those things, it's one or the other. They experience something that now they either have to attack you, or they have to change the subject or equivocate, or like you said on social media, just not comment, or not respond, or block you or unfriend you or whatever, unfollow the conversation or whatever. Very rarely do people in those immediate circumstances, it takes a very intellectually honest person and someone who actually is interested in growing in their knowledge rather than being right. Very rarely does that person in that very moment say, "Oh, wow, you've given me something to think about. I might be wrong and you might be right." So, which is why, and when I became an anarchist, I was like, and I just drop stuff on them and be like, "And this is why you're wrong." And when they would experience exactly what I experienced when people first said that to me, I'm like, "You jerk, I can't believe that you're not experiencing, that you're not agreeing with me." And then I had to kind of drop back, and I'm like, you were where this person was. You were the one telling them they hate America and that they just want the Muslims to take over, the Mexicans to take over, whatever I would say to them. You were that guy. So, why are you giving them a hard time for it too? So it'd be the same thing with you, right? Like if you're telling someone something and their first experiences to maybe pull away or to push back a little bit, that's kind of a natural thing, right? Like you don't expect them to just be like, "Oh man, where do I register to vote for Trump?" Right? Like there's a process there.
Right.
Right.
No, I love talking like this. I love challenging conversations. Because I've been putting my ideas out there more and more, people are running into videos and articles and stuff. And so I get these messages on Twitter, and sometimes people telling me I'm wrong. And I always go back and think about it. And unless it's about abortion or the Lord, I always say, let me think about that for a second. Sometimes I'm like, you got a good point. And then I'll ask a question. And so we have this dialogue where I'm asking questions because I really want to know what you think. But people don't want to know what you think anymore. They'd rather call you names. Like I've been told I'm self-loathing. I've been told that I vote Republican because I want to get in good with white people. I've been told, "Oh, you're such a beautiful girl. It's a shame that you're conservative." I'm like, what the heck? So it's always something. There's something fundamentally wrong with you because of the way that you think. Instead of just saying, interesting, I never thought about it that way.
Right.
We attack one another, and I try not to attack people, especially on like superficial stuff. Well, you're ugly or something like that. But
that's just there's no point to that.
Yeah, that's just stupid.
Yeah. So it couldn't possibly be that you just have a mind of your own and have your own set of thoughts and belief. You clearly you're just trying to get a white man or something like that. So it's so. What's that?
I've been told that as well. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. I've seen. So I've said, and I've said this before. If you take any type of person and their politics, so a white conservative, a black liberal, a Mexican libertarian, an Asian anarchist, a Jewish Republican, whatever. If you take any combination of identity and political belief, in my opinion, and I'm not a conservative, in my opinion, I think that black conservatives get it harder than anyone else, and it's why I have sympathy is the wrong word, because I don't feel sorry for you, but I have I guess an empathy for the fact that so when I went from being conservative to more of a libertarian, people would ask me questions or disagree with me, or when I went up to full on anarchist, people say I'm nuts or whatever, and that's fine. I am a little, but I don't believe at any point anyone has ever been like, you have sold out the Jewish people. I don't believe so. I've had a few people that have said, well, how could you not support Israel? And I'm like, because I don't support any government. But that's really, I've never really had someone who's like, well, you want the Holocaust to happen again or something like that. I routinely see black people who will give a right of center opinion on something like immigration, and that's something I wouldn't even agree with you on. But something like immigrate, and it won't even be the full-on build the wall and kick them all out thing. It'll be something like, we need to find a way to process the people that are here illegally, but then we have to have stronger border security to make sure that we are keeping out the bad people, or that we're making sure everyone who comes in is doing it the legal way. A very mainstream right of center opinion on that subject, and it's one I personally disagree on, because I don't think the government should do anything except go away. But I'm able to have that kind of have a reasonable discussion with someone about that. I will watch other, especially black people, and occasionally even white liberals, which I always find hilarious when a white liberal is telling a black person that they're, not being the right black person. Is it? That's anyway. So, but they'll say things like, well, this is how they did our ancestors, and so this is like, you're one of the slaves that would be in the house. You're a house slave, and they use a different terminology for that. You're a house person, and and then they'll pull up the Malcolm X quote about the house slave, and I'm like, it's me trying to avoid an argument. I'm thinking, okay, but you're here caping for Hillary Clinton, so what does that make? Like, I mean, if we're really going to go into that territory, you're caping for someone whose husband locked up more black people than any other president in history. So what, if we're going to go down this "you're not black enough" route, but I'm not the one to have that conversation with someone. So I watch in sadness as people rip someone apart for having a relatively mild, if not pro-Trump, but like, oh, you know what? Maybe Trump had a good point on this, or on taxes or healthcare or whatever. And it's like, if I as a white person disagree, they'll say, they'll either actually argue with me about it, or they'll just be very dismissive, like, well, you're a white guy, you're probably rich, whatever. But if a black person does it, it's like, here comes Black Twitter to rip the person apart and try to find out, what they do for a living and everything else, so that they can destroy their lives. Like, am I wrong? I mean, that it seems like black conservatives get a special kind of hatred that no one else gets.
No, you're not wrong. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that have been said to me. So, like, I have such a good, because of the Liberty Cadre blog, I have such a good, strong base of conservative friends, and like 2 mentors. So they're always reassuring me and stuff like that. Otherwise, I don't know if I could stand the heat, but they're always like, you go, girl, you're doing the right thing, you're saying the right thing.
Right,
they'll get
right.
me if I get a little off. But people can be vicious. On Twitter, it's always something about me not being black enough, or something like that. I'm wrong. They think I'm trying to get rich somehow. I wish it would work. It's not working so far. It's so dumb. So yeah, I never thought about it being more vicious than other people. I know this: I will not wear a MAGA hat. Like, first of all, I don't like doing what everyone else is doing. But
right.
if I did want to wear a MAGA hat, I will certainly not wear a MAGA hat because I'm not going to get beat up because it doesn't matter what race you are. Like, no one's off limits. And if I wore a MAGA hat, I feel like I would get a mob of angry black liberals that would beat me to a pulp. And I'm just not about that life.
And that's unfortunate. So, I mean, look, here's again, I'm not a Republican. So when I see the MAGA hat, I have the same reaction that I have to when I see like someone when people used to wear or when people still do wear the Obama stuff, the hope, where he's in like a tricolor, the face of Obama, and it says hope.
Right.
And it's like, or change, hope or change. And it's, the patron saint Obama of tricolor liberalism. And I look at it and I'm like, all right. And then I see the MAGA hat and I'm like, okay. And so my reaction is usually like, I'll just kind of chuckle to myself or whatever. But I also, there's a type of bravery that comes with the MAGA hat in some circles. I mean, if you're down here, like, I mean, where I am, people walk around with MAGA hats and Trump stuff, and everyone's people are high-fiving each other. And if there is a negative reaction to it, you don't see it a lot. So I think it depends on where you are. But I think definitely up north, or if you're in a college town or something like that, or out west, it's a completely different reaction. And it's like, and I always tell people, so they'll say, well, the MAGA hat people, they want this and they want that. And who else wanted that is Hitler. And I'll be like, all right, that's a weird comparison. But if we really break down and again, this is my anarchist talking, I'm like, if we really break down what Obama did compared to what Trump did, you're going to see it's a matter of variations in degrees in policy. There are very few things where it's like this one did this and this one did that. It's like, if this is the center, Obama did, Trump did this is my right is the left on this. So Trump did this, or no, Obama did this and Trump did that. So if you're saying that this is a Klan, the same thing as a Klan hood, to wear a MAGA hat, then pretty much you would have to say the same thing about any kind of hope and change stuff too. But it's just sad, the idea that you can't like express an opinion. It's one thing to express an opinion like all black people should die, or all Jews should die, or all white people should die, something like that. But if you're expressing like, I support this political candidate, it seems like, again, I'm an anarchist. Like, I don't agree with any of these people. So if I can tolerate, you having this opinion, it seems like kind of sad. Like, I mean, do you have an angry reaction if you see someone wearing an I'm with her hat or an Obama hat or something?
No, I really, really don't. I'll laugh because it's funny. Like, even bumper stickers are funny. I did it. I worked with a congressional campaign over the summer. So I put his bumper sticker on my mother's car. It was a magnet, so we could take it off. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put it on. But all of that stuff is funny to me, because then you can kind of look at the person. Like the other day, I saw like a Mitt Romney thing, and I saw "Make America Great Again" and like something about Trump on the back of a car. And I roll up, and it's this this old white guy. That was like stereotype. So sometimes it's funny because it'll be a black person with an Obama thing, or you could tell
right.
guy with the Hillary Clinton. So it's funny to me, but I don't get angry by any means.
Yeah, no, I mean, there'd be no reason to get angry, right? Like oh, did you, I think I lost you for a second.
I think I lost you too. But I was just saying, having an emotional response that extreme towards a symbol or a few words is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I find it interesting how people react to this stuff. And like I said, anytime I see a black person, they have a bunch of Trump stuff on, I'm like, I think I'm saying a prayer for you. Like, I'm sure we could have a great conversation on things we agree and disagree on or whatever, but I just know how tough you're getting it and that you don't care at all. Like, if you're truly embracing it, like, man, you are brave. You're probably armed too. So I'm definitely not going to give you a hard time. But so just going through the comments here, let's see where we go. How do you bring Dems and Republicans together in unity? Asks Sandra Jones. That's actually a good question. I'm going to get your take on that, and then I have an opinion on that. So go ahead.
I think the truth has to come out first about things. So if we could go back to abortion, like the truth has to come out about what it is. I mean, I'm sure you've seen videos where folks will go on the street, they'll interview a couple of girls and ask them about whether they're pro-choice or pro-life, and they'll go with pro-choice just because that's more popular. And then the person interviewing them will either show them pictures or break down what actually happens during abortion, and then they'll change them. So I think, you know, you have your side with your talking points, but not a whole lot of truth.
It says we're connected again. Okay, so we're connected again, hopefully. And so my thought on how so people bring this up a lot, and they'll say, like, how can we be united? And so my answer is that you're talking about, so if you're subdividing us up into the USA, you're talking about 320 million people. If you subdivide us up into even a state, you're talking about anywhere from, I think the state with the smallest population is Wyoming, which has something like 700,000 people, and the state with the biggest population is California, which has tens of millions of people. When you're talking about that many people, I don't know that there is such a thing as united. There's this concept we're sold on us being united, but if you take a group of 10 people, you're going to be hard pressed to get them to get along on or agree on important things. And so to extrapolate that out to people of different races, ethnicities, skin colors, backgrounds, nationalities, sexual preferences, genders, ages, life experiences, and everything else, I'm not sure that you can have a true what we've been sold as the idea of unity. You may be able to get a consensus. And again, this is why I'm an anarchist. If all you can get is consensus, then that means everyone else is being forced at gunpoint to do something they don't want to do. All that to say, because I'm not trying to bring anyone on to black pill them into anarchism, but I think the best thing in any democratic system of government or a society that's based on democratic voting to pick leadership and to agree to go by those rules, the best you're going to get is a consensus. And so you just try to build the biggest consensus you can on broad values, and then the goal there is to not water it down so much that don't even know what you're fighting for. So more comments. We got a lot of, you're a popular guest. We have a ton of comments. We've got a lot of people saying, you are right. I'm loving this. 100% correct. Awesome. I assume that's all about me. So thank you. No, I actually, a few of those said Z, so I'm pretty sure they were true. They were saying that about you. Michael Turks, free 21 Savage. Every day. I started a intermittent fasting that I'm going to do until 21 Savage is back, or until I lose 5 pounds in my midsection. Whichever happens first, I'm going to continue my intermittent fasting until we reach that. I'm going to stay in ketosis until 21 is back home in the A where he belongs. What else do we have here? Sheila said, hey, come back. We're back. Sorry about that. They lost us for like 5 or 6 seconds. Fotini Henderson says, I have little hope for reconciliation on truth between Democrats and Republicans based on the political effect of the Democrats. I know truth is partisan for them, and we all have different ideas of what truth is, even in the abstract. And then when it comes to, once you get your partisan bent into it, then it's a whole other thing. We all agree 2 + 2 is 4. I agree with my guest, with Nzinga, that you would think a baby is a human. And you will get people that will straight up tell you, no, the baby's not a human until the mother signs off and says, yes, I don't want this baby to die. Then it has rights. Or they'll say, yeah, the baby's a human, but I don't really, I don't care. Like the adult in that situation should be the one deciding whether it lives or not. And the logical conclusion of that is horrifying, right? Like the logical conclusion of this adult gets to decide if this adult lives or dies based entirely on this, or whether this adult gets to decide if this child lives or dies based entirely on the adult's and sometimes convenience, or just whether they, and I don't want to say convenience, because a lot of times it's very difficult decisions about their life and things like that. But it's not whether you keep the child or not. If you don't want to keep the child, you want a place for adoption, but to say, no, I want it to die. I'd rather it die than experience hardship. It's like, it doesn't get much harder in terms of hardship than being decapitated, right? Like that's a scary thing to say, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I,
I
I
agree with you.
yeah,
I mean, I think a part of it is the media. So, for instance, can't remember his name. Starts with an N. The governor of Virginia. When the
oh,
that shit
Northam,
came out of
Northam, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
when that came out about him in blackface, and CNN is saying that he's a Republican, and so things like that, like little things. I mean, I guess it's not really little, but just those slight things that the media will do, and to twist people's words or to straight out lie or to make up scenes. I don't think that helps at all either. But maybe it's easier at a local level to kind of bring Republicans and Democrats together. I mean, I know where I work, Democrats that are in office are always coming in. So they're kind of your neighbors. You can see them at the grocery store, maybe something like that.
Right, right,
I don't
right.
know. That comment had a good point. That the truth is for some reason the truth is relative now, which is ridiculous. But
It is, and in the more so, I mean, if you get into something like tax policy, I don't think that anyone can argue. Well, actually, that's not true. The only objective truth about tax policy is that all taxation is theft and should be ended. Short of that,
agree.
again, this is my anarchist coming out. Short of that, if you're getting into any kind of concept of what the tax rate should be and whether it should be flat or progressive or you know whether you know what things should be deducted, there are people that will straight up be like, okay, my idea on taxation is the objective truth. And they're talking about that, you know, this should be 32% and this should be 10% and this should be 18% and this should be fully deducted and this you should only deduct up to this point. And I'm like, buddy, objective truths are like the things that like the universe hinges on. Like your opinion on what the, you know, marginal tax rate should be and things like that. That's going to be wide open for opinion wise. And most, I would say most political stuff comes down on the margins of like, you know, should it be like this or should it be like that? Part of why I'm as extreme as I am is because I've kind of embraced these far logical conclusions that I take to be the truth, but I know most people aren't comfortable with that. So we're kind of in this thing instead. I wanted to talk to you about Donald Trump because you are a Republican. I wanted to get your thoughts on a few things. Actually, before that, I want to talk to you about this Ralph Northam thing. And apparently, and now, because in my notes, I think I mentioned Ralph Northam. Now it's apparently every Virginia person, every politician in Virginia over the age of, I guess, 40 has done blackface at some point. Because now, so it was either blackface or they've sexually assaulted someone. It seems to be one or the other. So the governor either was in blackface or in a Klan hood. And he said, well, no, that first he admitted to it and then said, no, actually I was remembering when I dressed up like Michael Jackson or something like that. So then after that, you've got the lieutenant governor, whose name I forget, who has been accused of sexual assault. And then you've got the person under that, the attorney general did blackface, I believe. And then the Republican head of the legislature there in Virginia, I don't know if he did blackface or he was in no, he was in what was it? He was in his yearbook had it lynching pictures in it or something like that. So I know, like, the whole damn state. Like, I mean, you're like, these people aren't 80 either. They're like younger than my parents, and like they were joking about. Like, really. So I guess I'm not even sure what my question is to you on this, other than what is your reaction to what is happening? Oh, and then there's someone in Florida that did blackface. A politician in Florida. Like, what is your, I guess I don't even have a question for you. What is your reaction to this?
It is so hilarious because all of these people are such a joke in a way.
Right.
And I know Northam won't resign. Like, he refuses. I think that the Democrat Party and the Republican Party in these places, they have a lot of work to do. Like, I'm thinking about locally, if someone did that here in Raleigh, I mean, the Republican Party here would like be in an uproar. And I hope that the Democrats are scrambling right now because at least in Virginia, like the Virginia party, because I mean it is a hot mess. So I don't even like I don't even really read the stories. I see the headlines because I feel like there's bigger fish to fry as far as the
Right,
country.
right.
But man, like when it was like this one guy, and you're like, man, that sucks. And then it's another guy, and it's another guy. I'm like, good lord, what
Who
is going
chose
on?
these people? Right, right.
Yeah, because when you have a candidate, the candidates should hire an opposition researcher who's
Yes.
supposed to go back and look and say, this could be a problem for you. So I'm wondering that if they just had really bad opposition researchers, or if they found it and said, hey, do you still want to run even though you have this picture? They decided to run anyway. But usually if that happens, then they would come up with some kind of story or something that the candidate can say just in case it comes out.
Right.
And I don't even think Northam did that because he doesn't even have a good story. He apologizes and then he says he didn't do it, or vice versa. I'm like, man, they have to clean it up. They got to get it together, and they need to vet their potential candidates a lot better than what they've been doing because that sucks.
Or like at all. So I mean, it seems like they didn't vet them at all. So, and this is Virginia, which is somewhat of a swing state. You think they'd have their act together? So, people in the past, before I went nuts, when people were like, "Hey, you should run for office as a Republican or whatever," and I'll even occasionally get people that for some reason think I should run as a libertarian, I guess as a hobby or something like that, and I'm like, and I'll say, "Listen, I did drugs for like 10 years straight. I don't fully remember everything that happened during that time. I don't think I hurt anyone. I didn't hurt anyone. Like I was just I wasn't a bad person or anything like that. I just have some hazy times, and I'm sure people could come up with some mildly embarrassing stories. But like, I didn't rape anyone. I didn't murder anyone. I didn't do blackface. I know even if I was high, I wouldn't have done blackface. I never dressed up as in a Klan outfit or as Hitler. I've like. And I've listened to, I see these people, they get elected, and I'm like, man, maybe I have a shot because I haven't raped anyone. Like, it seems like the bar is really, really, like, we've reached a new low bar. And so with Trump, I say he's scandal proof at this point. And the reason is because he has this thing where he says incredibly outrageous stuff and then slowly moderates it a little. So people already are shocked by this. And then they're like, oh, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said that. And he has enough of a core group of people that support him no matter what he says. And then so by the time people are talking about it again, he's like, well, no, what I really meant was this. And this now sounds reasonable because he said this first. And in terms of like, well, he did this and he did that. It's like, we've known that for 40 years. Donald Trump has been in the public eye since the early 80s. Everyone, like, people have disliked Trump forever, right? So like so he's kind of scandal proof. I think some of these other people are thinking, well, if he could do that, I guess I can get away with blackface. No, you can't. You cannot. Please don't. Stop. Like, parents, if you're dressing your kids up in blackface, that's going to haunt them forever. I want to ask you this, because this is actually a question, because I haven't had a question for a moment other than like, how insane is this? Right before the story broke about Northam that he was either in blackface or a Klan outfit or Michael Jackson, whatever. Before that broke, he talked about, I guess he was on a radio show and they were asking him about this abortion bill, which failed. That would have made it, given legal protections and reduce the threshold for what was required to be able to allow late-term abortions. And they brought him on basically to try to not scare people about it and to like make it sound more reasonable. And he basically said at one point that a baby could be born and then kept comfortable for a while the mother and doctors had a conversation about whether to allow it to continue living or not.
Right.
And then the blackface thing happened. Mm-hmm. And so I guess my question to you is, what does that say about us that the public at large, not pro-life people, not Republicans, not whatever, but like the public at large got more upset about the possibility that he might have put shoe polish on his face. And I'm not downplaying blackface. Blackface is not like, I mean, it's one thing to to dress up like Kanye West and put some darkener on your face to be Kanye. Not in the best taste, but it's not blackface. Blackface is what whoever was in that picture did. You're dressing up as a stereotypical Sambo slave with the plaid pants and the straw hat. Like there's no reason in the gloves and no, that's not right. But what does it say about that people got more upset about the possibility that he may have done that 20 years ago, whatever, or no, 35 years ago, more upset about that than the fact that he was casually discussing the legalization of killing a child that had been born like 2 days before.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I was saying earlier about we have bigger fish to fry, that was actually what I was thinking about is the late term abortion thing. I'm like, I honestly, I don't care about his blackface. If the folks of Virginia say we no longer want him, he did blackface, and how can he represent Black people if he did that? I can understand that. He's not representing me at all. I don't care.
Right.
But I think it says something about our culture that we so quickly jumped on that, and it's still being talked about. Like I still get Facebook notifications of articles written about that and videos talking about that. And the thing he said about abortion comes up only a few times. That says a lot about our culture. And I think that folks like you and I know we differ politically, but folks like you and I that notice that type of thing, we need to be very concerned. I really, really think so. And I'm not trying to be like a fearmonger or anything like that, but that scares me, because the way I think is, well, what about the future if we can so just casually talk about murdering a child? Right.
That's
Abort means to that definition doesn't even work in that situation. So I'm like, well, are we going to start knocking off people who, like older people? Are we going to knock off the homeless?
Yes, mentally? But that's yeah.
I'm like, because I mean, it's been done before. Countries have done it, and so that's not so far out there that can't happen here. So yeah, I think it says a lot about our culture and a lot about even probably the media in a way, because I don't know, when I was a kid, I'm sure if he'd said that on the radio, he would have been socially crucified. But today it's kind of like it's a normal thing, and that's scary to me.
Yeah, and that's I guess that's what I was getting to, because even like you said, this isn't abortion anymore. And now we say that there really isn't a massive difference between doing it inside and outside, especially at that age. But now we're no longer talking about abortion. The baby has been born, and they're not putting the baby's name on a birth certificate because they're deciding whether they're going to keep it or... And I would have wanted to know, okay, great. But they're having this conversation while the baby's being kept comfortable. And they're having this conversation while the baby's being kept comfortable. Okay, great. The mother says, I don't want it. I don't want to give it up for adoption. I want it dead, I guess is what they'd be saying. Now what? You don't feed it and let it starve to death? What are we talking about here? And you said this has happened in other countries, and it has. It's happened here too. Not specifically like mass killing, but I mean, the U.S. government put something like 1 million or more than 1 million Asian people in concentration camps during World War II, based on this, Japanese panic that they would all attack us because of Japan. They didn't do that to German Americans. Eisenhower, the guy that led the American war effort in Europe, was a German American, but Japanese people weren't afforded the same humanity that German people were. Slavery. I mean, it was for the first 100 years roughly 100 years that the U.S. existed. It was legal to own another person based on the premise that they weren't really people. They might be human, quote unquote, but they just weren't the same. The prevailing science at the time was that Black people were structurally different than white people. They were a completely different breed, and there was something wrong with them. And it was the humane thing to do to, keep them as slaves and make sure they didn't, be free. And even just a couple generations ago, they were giving syphilis to Black men, and then even though they had a cure for syphilis, they were telling them they were giving them a cure. just to watch what would happen to them. And the founder of gynecology was using slave women and torturing them to find out about their reproductive organs. It is not hard for people to categorize another class of people as not really deserving of their lives and easily saying, oh, well, I guess they can die then. Germans during the Third Reich were not some kind of special evil people. They had just been told that Jews and gypsies or Roma and homosexuals were really just kind of degenerates and not really like people. And they were causing a lot of problems, and it was probably best to just put them down. And, we're talking about babies. Like the class that we've chosen that we're possibly doing this to, it would be bad enough if it was a single race or a single culture or whatever. That would be bad enough. We're talking about doing this to everyone who's under a certain age. And where do we go from that? That's scary as hell, right?
That is very scary. And that's another kind of left thing. I meant to say that earlier when we first started. Is they kind of keep continuing to use the same tactics, like identity politics, but like we justify violence or killing by dehumanizing another person. And so, oh, it's just a fetus. It's not really. Oh, it's just a clump of cells. Oh, but they've got Down syndrome. They really can't really do anything in life. That kind of attitude. And I'm like, so life is not. I hate to say it, but based on history, based on what progressives say, life is not God, whether you believe in God or not. Like this idea of kind of natural rights, like God is value of life is not created by something outside of us. It's created by what we think is right. And I think that's the most arrogant thing. I was talking to someone earlier. I'm like, it's really arrogant, and it's really the pride of people, and to kind of put value on this but not this, because this is inconvenient. And that is very scary, because what if people under a certain education, or if you become lame, if you get in a car accident, you can't use your legs anymore. Like now you're moved into this category where you're not as valuable. That's a slippery slope.
It's extremely slippery. I have MS, and how many people are going to be like, well, something really bad could happen to him, so we need to just put him down now for his own sake. Like, I mean, this is the territory. We're a few degrees from that, but if we're saying a baby that the mother just doesn't want, like that's literally the reason why we're talking about killing this baby. The mother doesn't want the baby. Someone once gave me this extreme example of a baby that was born with its brain outside of its head, and birthing the baby would be a risk to the mother's life. And I said, okay, if we're talking a situation like that, then the mother and if the father's involved, the father and the doctor talk about options, because now we're talking about a threat to the mother's life, a threat to the baby's, the fact that the baby probably won't live very long. That is an example where, and you may disagree with me on this, where we're talking about a lot of different things other than just, we're poor and it's going to be, I don't want the kid to suffer under poverty, and I don't want to give the baby up for adoption, because then it won't know its real parents. And it's like, okay, but killing it would be better. So we could agree with each other on this all day long. I usually, like I said, I'll go to the comments, but we could spend 4 hours on these comments. You are an incredibly, I'm going to, I think, bring you on every other week, because you're incredibly popular, and you're getting some great stuff. So now the good news is 60% of these things are people saying how correct you are, and or how beautiful you are. And so let's see what's here. Taxation is theft. Yes. Someone said, what if Trump did blackface? We would test my theory about him being scandal proof, I guess, right? Let's see. I was raised on the premise that Harvey West says, I was raised on the premise that I may disagree with what you say, but we'll fight for your right to say it. We don't do that now. It's like a fundamental disrespect for others' beliefs. That's a good point too.
I agree with Harvey.
What's that?
I said I agree with Harvey.
Yeah. So someone asked for your thought. I don't think they care what I think. They asked for your thoughts I'm going to say what I think afterwards anyway, because it's my show. What your thoughts are on, I guess maybe I don't have it. Maybe they knew I didn't have anything to say. I haven't even read about it. Do you know anything? Have you read anything about this new Green Deal that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put out? And then, like, I guess she's pulled it because it's been made fun of so much. Have you heard anything about it?
Yeah. She's fun. She's so fun. I was talking to a friend about her, and I said, she's the type of person that you just want to go and hang out with and just listen to what she says.
Right.
Because I think if she was more relaxed, she'd get calmer. And I hate to say that, it's just she doesn't make any sense. She's super passionate. I was like, man, I wish she was conservative because she'd be great.
She's down for it. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, she's so energetic. Like, there's a lot of likable things about her.
Yeah.
The fact that she's young, the fact that she kind of uses kind of young people terminology on social media. She's super passionate, and then we got to get rid of cow farts or get rid of planes and use trains. I'm just like, oh, honey, no.
The world's gonna.
Yeah, she's like, you can tell.
I think we
take her under their wing and say, hey, let's mentor this person. She could go far. Like, nobody tried to mentor her, or either she didn't look for it. She just decided to run.
Right.
That Green Deal is hilarious. Like, Spike, you have to go and read it. It's the funniest thing. If you want a good laugh right before you go to sleep tonight, read that. Just go watch Ben Shapiro talk about it or something like that, or read the Federalist about it. And they used the picture they used was like unicorns and rainbows and stuff like that. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. Like, I can't remember what percentage, but like they say that her Green Deal would take away like a huge chunk of the American economy.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So she's an idealist, is what she is, which I think most of us young people are. But the idea, or the hope, is that she would move away from just being an idealist and be a little bit more practical.
Or at least have. Yeah. So the one thing I caught from it, and I agree with you on that. I think she needs to maybe inject some reality into her thoughts. She said we had 12 years before the world's going to end unless we do these things. And one of the things she wants to do is to start laying down train rails, which take decades. If you know the history of the trains in this country or anywhere, it's a multi-decade process, which is why we've moved away from it, because we're not going to sit here and try to figure out what the traffic's going to be like in 30 years. And we don't do it anymore. And she wanted to, I think it was either ban or greatly restrict plane travel. And I'm like, man, you know what? If I have 12 years to live, I'm going to travel a lot on planes, actually. Like, I'm not waiting for the train for the last year. So yeah, I will need to read it. Let's see what else we have here. Sheila Jones says he was about to do the moonwalk if his wife hadn't Northam, yeah, if his wife hadn't stopped him. So we talked about this on the show. Me and Matt talked about this on the Muddied Waters of Freedom. If he had, first of all, we think he's probably pretty good at it. We think he's good at the moonwalk, because if you watch that video, he was excited. He was like, he'd been getting beaten up for 2 days now. And then someone was like asking him to moonwalk, and he kind of looked down at the floor and he's like, yeah, I got this. And then, like, right as he was ready to start getting into that, because you got to kind of position yourself for it, right? You got to get centered. And, and his wife was like, no, that wouldn't be appropriate. And he was like, my wife said that wouldn't be appropriate. And it was like his whole, like, I kind of felt bad for the guy in that. I know this was the guy that was just talking about murdering babies, but in that moment, I kind of felt for him, because I've had those times where people are like, hey, do this. And then my wife's like, no, that's stupid. I'm like, my wife said that was stupid. I can't do that. And I bet he's good. When all this is over, because I think he's only limited to one term anyway. When all this is over, that man needs to moonwalk, Sheila. I definitely want to see that. Someone
from the NAACP in the area in Virginia said that he grew up with black kids, and so she's like, he's a good dancer. She was talking to Steven Crowder, who was pretending to be black, and kind of prank calling her.
Oh,
okay. Like, yeah, he's a good dancer. He grew up around black people, so he probably can moonwalk.
I believe it. You can tell when someone's excited about something and they know that they're good at it. And they were like, "Can you moonwalk?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Can you do it now?" And he's like looking at the floor. He's like, "Yeah, I can do that now." And it was like, he's like, finally, after 2 days of everyone, beating me up and in my political career, I get to do it finally. And then his wife was like, saved his political career, because that would almost assuredly end it. Although, if it was really good, like if he could really do it really good and then do the spin and the kick and Shimon and all that, like if he could do it really, really well, that might actually save him. So his wife might have screwed him there. We don't know. Let's see what else we got here. Michael Turks says, real men put on their clothes on first, then apply lotion to the remaining visible parts. Okay. Jacob LaBelle says, I'd vote for either of y'all. Thank you, Jacob. Let's see what else here. Michael Turks asked us what our favorite chicken place was, and Sheila said Bojangles. I would go. I don't, Michael, and you know this about me, Mike. I don't do the chain chicken places, and if I did, it would be Maryland's or maybe Popeyes. But I'm not doing the rest of that. By the way, anyone who doesn't know, Michael Turks is black, so I think he's allowed to ask me what kind of chicken I want. Shane Sweeney says, Japanic is quite possibly the funniest thing I've ever heard. Spike, you win the internet. Thank you. I think it was actually a term, Japanic. Go Nzinga. I think, or go Zinga. I'm sorry. I'm reading it phonetically. What else here? I agree. Our culture is regressive, shocking, but not terribly surprising. That's, yeah. Okay. So someone has asked what my next thing is here. So now that we have talked about moonwalking and the really important stuff, like moonwalking and blackface, it's clearly the most important things in American politics right now. I want to get your thoughts on Trump. Were you an early supporter of his? Were you one of those where it was like, well, he's the last one left, so I guess we'll go with him? Were you, where did you fall on do you even consider yourself a supporter of his necessarily? Or where would you say you fell on that when it comes to the president?
So originally I wanted Ted Cruz very badly. And then the first time I heard him speak, I can't remember what he said, but I remember thinking, that's nothing I haven't said here in my living room. He's talking like everyday people talk. Right. I remember thinking that specifically, and I didn't think he'd last long, to be honest with you. And then when he was the last one, I said, okay, I'm voting for him. And then now I'm a Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump worshiper. Like, right. I call him Trump worshiper. People like, he can do no wrong. Yeah. And there's folks that are like, oh, he's doing that because he has something planned. I'm like, is he a mastermind? That like, is he that smart? Like, he does something and it's like, oh no, he knows what he's doing. Yeah. Just you wait and see. And I'm like, okay, I guess I will. I don't think he's that. I don't think he's a mastermind. Like it's almost like he's a criminal mastermind, but a good guy or something like that. Right. Like the guy on the TV that can think his way through everything, even though he's in a bind like that. And he's not that guy. I think he's smart. I think he knows how to use a crowd. I mean, even how he had those ladies in white cheering for him at the State of the Union. I mean, they pretty much stood in a standing ovation, and they showed who they really were because they didn't stand for human trafficking or abortion or all of those other things. But anyway, they stood for them, right? Yeah, they stand. Yeah, they stood for themselves. And it's like, these are witches. I'm not gonna lie, but I like Trump. I don't mind that he's rude. I really, really don't. I think most people are kind of rude, but we respect those people because at least we know what they actually think. And that's kind of how I feel about Trump. And then he shows his hand too. So it's not like it's a secret that he's doing these things or he wants to get MS-13 out or whatever. So that's my stance.
That's I respect that stance. I respect any stance. I respect people's stances, but I respect that stance. My take on Trump is that I get that a lot. People are like, he's rude, and I'm like, okay, and they're like, he says mean things, and I'm like, buddy, again, I'm an anarchist. The job of the president is to oversee your being robbed and to enforce a massive list of laws under, for lack of a better word, gunpoint, and to oversee making sure you comply with that or caging you or killing you. So his job is almost like this giant, if you look at, how government works as an anarchist or even as a really extreme libertarian, his job is to rob all of us and to use that money to fund our subjugation and the mass murder of people around the world, which is exactly what Obama did, and Bush and Clinton and whatever. Mm-hmm. He also talks rudely. Like, okay, in the scale, it's like how we were talking about blackface versus talking about murdering children, right? Like, okay, he said a bad word, or he said, he talked about a woman in a way you didn't think was respectful, or he said the grab him by the pussy thing, or whatever. He said something you don't like, you think is disrespectful. In my mind, what his actual job is, which is the same thing that Obama did. Obama killed more children than any other Peace Prize winner in history. In my mind, I kind of prefer the guy who actually makes people dislike what he's doing. I kind of almost prefer that, because I'm like, well, at least, so like another thing that happened was that guy that got killed by the Saudis. He was a Turk and he was killed in the Saudi embassy. And there was all this, well, what's the U.S. going to do? And Trump said, we're not going to do anything about it. We don't like that he did that, but we also have, a lot of strategic deals with the Saudi government. We buy a lot of oil from them. They buy a lot of weapons from us. We're not going to do anything about it. And people were outraged that he said this. They couldn't believe he would say such a thing. And then they talk about how there was another similar thing where the Saudis did something, and Obama was very stern about what they did and said a very, very beautiful speech about how it was wrong that what they did. And then he didn't do anything about it. He continued the various deals that the U.S. government and the Saudi government have. In other words, they both did the same thing, but Trump was honest about the fact that they weren't going to actually do anything about it. And I'm like, okay, A, this makes you hate government more, so yay for me. And B, he's actually being honest. My favorite picture in White House history ever is Donald Trump standing there with a bunch of chicken nuggets and Big Macs, and he's just sitting there smiling, and he has his arms out like he's doing this great thing. And I'm like, this is the best. This, in my mind, and maybe you disagree, this in my mind was like, it's like they've created this whole temple to the idea of the government, the state, being this, big, larger than life thing, these beautiful buildings, and almost like a cult figure, the rule of law. And now here you have this guy, this orange spray painted guy with his, whatever he does with his hair, just standing there in the middle, this, reality TV tycoon, standing in the middle of it with fast food, with this big smile on his face. And I'm like, if you ever needed a picture to show that this is all just a bunch of crap, here's Donald Trump showing it for you. And I really, me personally, I love what he is doing to the concept of that this government is actually more important than like our individual lives. Did any of what I just say make sense, or was I just ranting for a while?
I think so. I think I caught some of it. Because he didn't intern in his 20s and then become a staffer and then run for office himself. He doesn't care about all of that. Like,
exactly. He doesn't care about any of it.
Yeah. So like, even with the shutdown where I work, people were like, I cannot believe this. Most of them are liberal. They just cannot believe that he has allowed the government to be shut down. And I'm like, I think it's great.
Keep it shut down. Yeah.
I'm still taking my taxes out. So who cares? I think it will, like, and then people are like, oh, we're going to pretend to be really, really outraged. And then that'll make him quit doing what he's doing. And he's like, no, we'll be shut down longer if this continues. And I'm like,
exactly. Yeah.
Do it. Like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly.
The thing is that the things that he does, he's like, this isn't good for the people. So why are we going to continue doing it? And I know, like, you know, the healthcare and all that jazz. A lot of stuff he hasn't been able to do in the wall or whatever. But all of his reasoning is not. It seems, at least, it's not. Oh, let me do something good for my legacy. It's more like, okay, but this is hurting a bunch of Black people, illegal immigration. This is hurting Hispanic Americans. Why are we continuing to do this again? You know, why don't we go ahead and fix it now? So I like that he's very, he's about fixing stuff, getting things done, and then just being done with it, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. That's what I like about him. You know, we want bosses like that. So why not have? Not saying he's the boss. I know you don't like the way that sounds. Just saying, we like people like that in our everyday lives.
He's the executive of the U.S. federal government. So this is another thing that I love, that he's, so we have been abused with this idea. How far do I want to get into this? Okay, I'll do it. We've all been kind of subjected to this Stockholm Syndrome idea that our captors are actually our servants, right? Like, so this person who is robbing you and telling you what to do and hiring people to drive around in cars to remind you that you have to listen to them and they'll use whatever level of force is necessary to bring you into compliance. They're actually your servants, right? Like, they're actually serving you. They're public servants. And a brief look at what they're actually doing, and a brief step back of and looking back and seeing like how hard they fight to hold on to their power and who they're willing to hurt to stay in power and who they're willing to hurt while they're in power, immediately disabuses anyone that's paying attention of the idea that these people are our servants. A public servant is a firefighter or an EMS worker, or some would say a cop. I wouldn't, but someone who's serving the public, someone who works at a hospital, someone who's in the ER is a first responder. Someone, is a public servant. In my mind, they are serving the public. A politician is not serving the public. Donald Trump doesn't pretend to be a public servant. And so at times he'll say things like, I'm doing this for you or whatever, but very quickly he embraces the idea of like, I'm flying on Air Force One and I'm in the Cadillac and I'm the boss. And that's how he's always acted. And I like that it's kind of forcing people to see like, okay, he's not your public servant, but neither was Obama. Like, none of these people are actually serving you. But anyway, I want to get your thoughts because the State of the Union just happened. We watched it, guys. If anyone has a spare 2 hours to watch me and Matt Wright react to live to the State of the Union, be sure to check that video out. The actual State of the Union part's about halfway through. We kind of pre-gamed it and then did that, and it's pretty much two libertarians sitting there chuckling. And if you're going to watch the State of the Union, watch it that way. It's the most entertaining way to watch it. I wanted to get your thoughts on the State of the Union because as someone who sees how people react to politicians, I think if the job of the State of the Union is to get as many voters to agree with you as possible, I think he did an amazing job. I think that it's going to reflect in new polling that he got the majority, and I would say 80% of what he said, I rolled my eyes because I'm an anarchist, but his job was not to try to convince me of anything, right? His job was to convince you and other voters that his agenda is the right agenda, and I think he did an amazing job at it, and I think he master manipulated the other side. He had them completely doing everything. Like, it was like he would say, okay, now do this, and they would do it. He entirely played the entire audience on both sides. What were your thoughts on the State of the Union? How did you walk away from it? What were your thoughts thinking after watching it?
I thought it was terrific. I loved it. I even liked the folks that he had in as guests, especially when it was the prison reform and the First Act thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, here's two living, breathing people right here in front of us that their lives are changed. And a lot of the folks that were in that building or in that room could have done something a long time ago, and they never did a thing. So I'm just like, I love that. I loved having the World War II people there. I
have to interrupt you. I have to interrupt you real quick. They didn't not only a lot of them didn't do anything. A lot of them are responsible for them being in prison in the first place.
Right.
So if you look at politicians, if you look at any of those people that have been in there the last 15, 20, 30 or more years, they are exactly the reason that guy was in prison, or that the lady, I forget their names, that they were in prison. So it was even worse. They were their captors, and it was, Trump, after hearing about their case and working to actually get some prison reform done, is the reason that they're free now, or that they're out of prison now. So I just wanted to interrupt you. They not only didn't do anything, they actually are responsible for the fact that they were in prison in the first place. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
That I like the idea of having those World War II vets there, because the other side calls Trump and his supporters Nazis, and then we have two guys who fought actual Nazis.
I didn't even get that. You're right, though.
Yeah, so I saw someone say that on Facebook, and I was like, yeah, because I mean, I love that generation anyway, like the greatest generation, like the ultimate sacrifices they made and all that jazz. Like I kind of romanticize that era. But then even the ladies in white, and how people were making memes of them looking like the KKK, that was so funny to me. And then they stand up and they're clapping for themselves. And I was texting like 3 people at one time during this, and I'm like, so wait a minute, we don't clap about stopping human trafficking,
right?
But we still clap because we're women in Congress. Like that even matters first of all.
Like it even matters. No, I know exactly.
It doesn't matter. They're high-fiving one another. Even some of the men who are like beta males, they're like, we're talking about you guys. This is great. Yeah, you guys. I'm like, oh, come on. You didn't clap for some of the things that you should have clapped for.
Right.
But you clap for yourselves, and then you clap for your colleagues. It was revealing, because, I mean, you were just kind of hitting on it, is they like being elites, and that's why they continue to run for office, even though they're old as dirt. I mean, they zoomed in on some people, and I think Mitch McConnell was one of them, and I was like, he needs to retire immediately. Like, he looked like a corpse, and I hate to say it, but he's so old. But they just like being there because they have all those privileges.
Right.
Another thing is Nancy Pelosi and the.
Yeah, what was that?
I don't know. I thought maybe it was the speech.
That's what I was.
I was like, is it blank paper? Is she just trying to distract herself?
And it was really big. Like, it wasn't legal size paper. It was like these big. I thought they were protest signs. I thought, we actually said this. I was like, is she about to get up and hold up like a impeach Trump sign or something? Which, if she had done that, most entertaining thing ever. If she had done, I was like, oh my gosh, I hope that's like a code pink sign or something. Like she's about to hold up, hands off my vagina or whatever. Like whatever she was gonna like. I was so desperately hoping that was gonna be, because that would have forget the fact that would have completely played into Trump's whole narrative about that all they can do is yell at him. I just would have been that and Northam moonwalking. If Democrats want to get my want me to like them more, dance and signs. What was that? Did they ever find out what that was? Was it?
Not that I know of. I thought that maybe it was the speech itself, and she was kind of like, when is this over? And just kind of to mark her spot or where he was. But what was really funny is that when she gets super uncomfortable or super angry, she starts to play with her teeth, and she's like doing this, especially when he would hit certain points and she would mess with her teeth, and you could see her looking at her colleagues who were sitting out in the front, like, it was almost like, how are we going to respond to what he just said? And I'm like,
right.
Like, he said something about the union is strong, and she shakes her head like
this. She shook her head when he said that.
I was right, because I was going to write something on the State of the Union. I never got around to it, but I'm writing notes, and I'm writing everything that they clap for and everything that they stay silent for. It was very revealing. I like I said, I haven't been politically involved very long, and so I saw the last State of the Union and now this one, and I was like, I don't know if this is a normal thing for us to just not clap about good things and like humans living and
humans being alive.
Yeah, like unemployment is low for blacks, but that's the people you claim to advocate for, but they just sit there, and I'm like, what? Unemployment is low for Hispanics. What? But you women are congresswomen, and they're like, yes, we are.
Yes, we sure are.
It's like they're so selfish and arrogant. I guess all of them in the room kind of are, or most of them are. but the Democrats really showed themselves.
Yeah, so that's and to let you know contextually, that is kind of a common thing with State of the Unions, is that or States of the Union, however the address is, that the side that supports the president will agree with it, will get, clap every time they say something, and the other side will only clap when it's like unifying stuff, like they'll say America's a great country, and oh yes, yeah, America's a great, very pedantic, very, it's stupid. I honestly think Trump didn't even want to do the address at first, because it's like, yeah, why are we doing this? Like, what happens here? But one of the things that, someone once asked me, do I think Trump is stupid or smart? And there are different types of intelligence. Donald Trump is probably not someone that you would want to sit down with and have a long conversation about political philosophy and foundational concepts and things like that. I don't think that's anything that interests him, and I don't think he'd really have much to add to that. I don't think he's a terribly cerebral person. I don't think he's a bookworm or anything like that. He has and this is something that a lot of smart people don't have. He has a very innate understanding, instinctual understanding of how people are going to respond to him, which is, I mean, his basically he's a salesman. Like his career is in selling stuff, including now as a politician, is to sell himself and his ideas, or the things he wants to do. But more than that, selling himself. His biggest policy is, if you have me in charge, we're gonna win because I'm a winner. And that a lot of people are like, okay, then I'll just choose you because you say you're a winner or whatever. He has an amazing ability to understand how people will respond to him. Most importantly, not just the people who agree with him or that are inclined to agree with him. Most importantly, and we saw this with the speech, he knows how people who hate him will respond. And so he has been an expert in manipulating them for like 4 years now. He's just been like, I'm going to say this and they're going to do this, and then bam, we're going to hit him with this. Or we're just going to let him flail and keep saying that. And so I'm trying to come up with an example.
Well, remember right before the shutdown, he, Mike Pence, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy were sitting in the Oval Office, and they started kind of debating in front of the media.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example.
Yeah. And it made, so one thing that did, that I saw, was they tried to paint this narrative that Trump or Pelosi and Schumer and the Democrats are, calm and smart and intelligent, and Trump is just flailing. Because when he talks, he's kind of disjointed, and he's all, and I relate to that because I'm kind of disjointed too. But that he kind of is all over the place. In that argument that they had, it showed that they were all just arguing with each other, and so it kind of brought them down to what they tried to say was his level. So I did appreciate that. I'm trying to think of an example where, like, every time, there are only a handful of people on the planet that are able to completely decide what the conversation is going to be moving forward just by saying something. And he's one of them. And so you have the media and the people on the left who are like, we need to stop letting Donald Trump, we need to stop going by what Trump is saying. We need to stop letting him dominate the conversation. And then seconds later, he can tweet something that has nothing to do with what anyone's been talking about. And those exact people who were just saying we need to move past Trump, we need to move on from Trump, they immediately are like, we need to spend the next 6 days talking about nonstop what Trump just said, why we disagree with it. But it's we have to talk about what Trump just said. And so he sucks all of the air out of the room for anyone else that was trying to say anything. And it's why I personally think he's gonna get reelected. So I guess I would let me get your thoughts on that. Would you say, like, can you think of anyone offhand that that is better at getting their opponents to, I guess, do whatever they want them to?
I cannot. Maybe we have one in each generation, one in each era.
Right.
Trump is that one for us. I can't think of anybody.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's offhand. I can't think of anyone. So I think we've gone through everything, and I really appreciate your time here. You've been a great guest. I hope that I can have you on in the future. Before we go, and thank you again for coming on, Nzinga. Before we go, I want to give you the chance to give us your final thoughts. Anything that you think that we didn't talk about, anything that you want to talk about, anything in the future, anything you want to plug, anything, whatever you want to talk about. The floor is yours.
I will say I do like what Trump said about this nation will never be a socialist country, because that seems to be the trend with younger people. And he said we are born free and will stay free. I really like that. I also would add that it's conservatism. I mean, it's about, which you won't like, but it's about ordered liberty, kind of balance between freedom and order, and like people still have to have self-control, but the government is not supposed to come and tell them how to live their lives, which I that kind of makes me a libertarian a little bit, because conservatives, or people say conservatives, want to run their private lives and what they do in the bedroom and stuff like that. Right. But another thing I want to add just before we go is that for 2020, just to encourage people who maybe work in local politics to maybe get this conversation going in their local party, is that I think we need Republicans with guts again. Or I don't know if we ever had it. I think we probably did, but especially now that we can't have these politically correct type of people. We need people who are just going to tell the truth and not be a Trump, but they have to be a little bit tougher. And I think we have to run people on the local level, on the federal level. We have to run people that have a lot of guts, and people who are willing to tell the truth. And also, these parties, I know here in my county, there's a lot of infighting. And if we want to win in 2020 on the local level, then the infighting has to stop, and egos need to be put aside. And we need to put people in office, properly vet them, make sure they're not doing blackface, and make sure they haven't raped anyone in the past.
Anyone?
Train them, get them philosophically sound, and send them on their way, and get some professionals around them. So those are the things that I've really been thinking about a lot, along with some of the other things we've talked about.
Okay, cool. So if you're listening, Republican, Libertarian, whatever, you want to get your candidates out there. They need to be a fighter, which I agree with. I think this age of, are you familiar with the Overton window?
A little bit.
Okay, so the Overton window, and Tom Woods calls it the 3x5 card of allowable opinion. So if you figure that, if you say that a room has all of the ideas that you could possibly have about a concept, about an idea, the Overton window is the window that people, that popular culture and media have decided is if you stay within that, then your opinion is allowed. So you're allowed a little bit of divergence, but if you have, so for example, like what the tax rate should be. I'm all the way over here saying it should be 0%, there should be no taxes or government. So that's as far as it gets that way. Over here is, people who say everything should be taxed and everything should be collectivized and we should live in a socialist state structure or whatever. And then in the middle, what's considered the Overton window is whether it should be, let's say, 39% or 42% or something like that. So that's the Overton window. I think that for far too long, politicians, especially on the right or in the libertarian side, the non-progressive side, have tried to argue and try to exist within that window, even though their ideas aren't within that window. Trump was like, no, that window's stupid. I'm going to smash this wall in and say whatever I want. And I think that if not necessarily his style or even his policies, but that idea of, no, this is what I have to say, and I'm going to say why I agree with it. So you need fighters. They have to have not raped anyone. They need to have never been in blackface or, dressed as Hitler. There's some vetting, just some basic vetting. Like, have they ever praised, the Holocaust or something like that, or denied the Holocaust, praised or denied? If the only opinion that they need to have had on the Holocaust is that it was not a good thing, or slavery, or like, you need them that those are some. So get that and get some good candidates, and be sure to check out Liberty Cadre. I think it is Cadre. Their website is libertycadre.com. And if you look up the Liberty Cadre on Facebook. They're on there as well, and we have that in the show notes. Now, are you guys on YouTube or anything else? Or I think it was just Facebook and the website, right? Or
yeah, no YouTube yet.
Okay, they're gonna get a YouTube though. YouTube's coming. And be sure to check them out everywhere there. And if you Nzinga, thank you again for coming on. I hope you had a good time. I had a blast having you on. If you can just stick around with me for a minute, I'm going to talk to you during the outro while that's going. But guys, thank you so much again for tuning in to watch me and my guest Nzinga Johnson on this episode of My Fellow Americans. Be sure to tune in. Oh no, this isn't Wednesday, it's Friday. Shabbat Shalom, happy Sabbath to all my Sabbath people. And be sure to check us out this coming Tuesday on the Muddied Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I will be parsing through the week's events that as they happen. And then on who's my guest next week? Wednesday, next Wednesday, my usual time on My Fellow Americans at 8 p.m. My guest will be Wayne W.B. Bradley. Anyone who's followed the Republicanism, we got a lot of we're doing a lot of black Republicans the next few weeks. So Wayne W.B. Bradley is going to be on. Wayne Bradley, hashtag Wayne Strong, is going to be on. And then on Thursday, do not remember who Matt is going to have on his show on the Writer's Block. You're not gonna believe who's on there. It's going to be amazing. But thank you again for tuning in. We will see you next week, and God bless you.
They say about an eye for an eye in a time when the blind lead the blind. Who am I to deny I would cry when a loved one dies? I recognize that body outside, bullet holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these years I close my eyes, open up to only find I'm in line. There's no pointless murder happening all the time. Either lose your life or mine. Caught up in them versus I. That ain't how it started, nah. How were we supposed to survive? There's a war going on outside. Who would want to raise a child? Whom the tomb is flashing by. Now you have to say goodbye when you watch them on